Welcome back to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and I'm a social impact strategist here to help you build a successful and sustainable legacy of social change. In this week's episode, we're going to hear from a social entrepreneur who has been on a journey to change the world just like you. If you are interested in social entrepreneurship, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into this week's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Velos, and I am here with a wonderful Latina that I met through the network of Mujeres de HACE. So shout out to Mujeres de HACE. And I was just so amazed when I saw her at work, and I thought, I need to be this lady's friend. So I'm excited that we've become friends over the couple of years that we've known each other. This is Miss Ruby Garcia, and she has a variety of things that she does. On top of being a hypnotherapist, she's also a coach for Latinas, and she has a brilliant voice in helping us to understand what Latinx people are going through, and also how we can move past some of the generational traumas and barriers that we've experienced in the past. Ruby is doing a wonderful body of work that she will share with us today. And I just wanted to leave space for her to give us her wisdom and her perspectives, but also to unlock some things for us about tools we can use in order to move forward in our journey as social entrepreneurs. So that's what we're going to talk about today in this episode. And I'm going to just turn it over to Ruby to introduce herself and her story to our audience.
Thanks, Wendy. I'm super excited to be here. Like you said, I just want to reiterate, you're one of my favorite people. I feel like once we connected, it was just like instantaneous connection and bond. So I was very excited to be able to, join you today and your audience. So for those that don't know me, again, I'm Ruby Garcia. I'm a leadership consultant, career mindset coach, and upcoming author. I have a book due out later this year called Querida Latina, which is all about navigating the professional workspace as a first-gen Latina. And my work is really, I like to say, it's at the intersection of life and leadership, and that being the mindset piece. So I really help Latinas move from self-sabotaging thoughts and behaviors to self-mastery through increasing their self-love, their self-worth, and their self-confidence, so they can show up as powerful, fully expressed human beings in this world.
And I'm sure people understand why that fascinated me the first time I met you. I was like, that's me. She's speaking to me. She wants to empower me.
Well, that's why we're like this, right?
Yes.
We get along so well.
Yeah, and it's great. And I think that we have such a similar perspective on the importance of mindset and how we just need to move forward in our journey in the right mindset. So let's start the conversation there, because I think that that's something that we talk about a lot on this podcast, is how do you stay in the mindset to show up and serve, right, as a social entrepreneur. So what have you learned about mindset, entrepreneurship, serving others, and continuing to be, especially for Latinas, continuing to show up despite all of the things that we might have experienced in the past?
Yeah, mindset is huge. I mean, of course, I'm going to say that I'm a mindset coach, right? Um, but also, so I'll just give you some perspective. I worked in the corporate space for about 17 years, and so I understood how mindset was important, because when I transitioned to entrepreneurship, it was a whole other ball game, and I had a real challenge navigating the going from employee mindset to entrepreneur mindset. And I know I've heard you talk about this as well, right? And I wasn't prepared for that, and to be honest, I failed miserably in the beginning because of that, and other reasons. I'd gone through some life transitions, and just navigating other parts of my life, and really still need to even do some internal work and therapy, to be honest. But that mindset is so important, because it really does impact how we're going to show up at work. It impacts how we show up in relationships. It impacts our relationship with ourself, right? If we have negative self-talk, then that even our body is going to feel that, and disease can even be manifested, autoimmune disorders, things like that. And so getting to learning to master your mindset is one of the most important things that you can do in order to make every other domain or part of your life, that much better.
Yeah, and I love where you talked about the employee to boss mindset because that is something that we've talked about in the first season of this podcast. How do you maintain this growth mindset over the course of the things that happen to you in entrepreneurship? Because it's not a linear journey. There's challenges, setbacks, detours, all kinds of different things that happen. How have you, as an entrepreneur, continued to show up day after day and take inspired action and do the things you need to do in order to get to where you are today? Because you're actually like a little further in your journey. um it- when you reflect back on it, what made you show up every single day and get in that right mindset?
It's a choice. It comes down to having a choice. And I think one of the big things that really have has helped me stay on focus, I guess two things. One is um being really connected to my why, what's my greater purpose, right? And that vision is the thing that leads me. So it's not even about me, it's about being in service to others, right? And I in the deepest part of my core and in my heart and my being, like I know I'm this is the work that I'm meant to do, right? I have thought about going back into corporate. Every time I do it, like I get this visceral, you know, uh like my body is just like, ah, no, that's not it, because this is the work that I know I'm meant to do. And so that's one part. And then the second part is now I lost my own track of thought. Tell me again.
Girl, that happens to me so often I can't. But I think that the first part was, how do you the question was, how do you consider
Oh,
continue to show up in the right mindset?
yeah.
Yeah.
So that is just, so choice is one, right? Choice and being connected to your bigger vision. The second thing is accountability. Accountability, accountability, accountability. Like if you have a goal, whether you're an entrepreneur or in the corporate space or nonprofit or government or whatever you're working in, if you have a goal, it's about having accountability. So I am not very reliable on my own. I will honestly admit that to you. If I am set out to do things on my own, I will procrastinate. I will engage in some of those self-sabotaging behaviors that I talk about. So I create a lot of structure in order to have the follow through. So that could look like power hours. It could be look like calendar. I have a huge on my calendar. If it's not in my calendar, it does not exist. So calendarizing everything that I do, even lunches, breaks, walks, exercise. I put everything in a calendar because that's the one of the ways that I keep myself in structure. And then also, I'm always involved in some type of learning community. So having mentors, coaches, peer coaches, that is also really important to me in my own growth. And then third, what I'm going to throw in is I think just by doing this work naturally, I have to be modeling the work that I'm doing for those that I'm working in partnership with. So my clients oftentimes will push me even more so, and they don't even know it because I want to always make sure that I'm a couple steps ahead, and not as and I'm better than them, but in terms of being able to support them in the best way possible.
Yeah, and that's a great mission to keep you growing because you're like thinking, okay, what else, what more can I do to serve better or serve a new need that emerges or whatever those things are. And I appreciate that for sure. And I also want to get back to what you said because this is really important to reiterate is that coaches and people who do this work often have coaches. Like they've often gone through a lot of programs or invested a good amount of money or had a good amount of time that they spent learning things. What was that journey like for you to get yourself to the place where you can do this work, especially transitioning out of corporate?
Yeah, yeah. So we met through the Mujeres program, which is a Latina leadership program, and that was probably one of the first leadership programs that I had gone through. That was, I guess, more formal. And at the same time, I had signed up for a 1 year leadership and coach training program. So I went through that. Right from there, pretty much coming out of that within a few months. And that program was a big investment. It was about $16,000, probably a little more even. My second program was a $30,000 investment into a mastermind. And so, I'm no stranger to investing to myself. And over the years, I've developed myself through other programs. So it is definitely something that, I've just kind of added on. I mean, I have by nature, I'm a lifelong learner, so I always have a list of ongoing learnings that I want to delve into. But even with that said, I will just share that it still wasn't, even though I was getting all the development training, it part of it, when I look back, part of it was from a place of not enough. I'm gonna be really honest about that. I was doing it because I didn't feel like I was enough. I wasn't ready enough. I wasn't smart enough. I needed more qualifications. And so I was given a lot of strategy. And this goes back to the mindset, but I did not have the mindset yet. So the mindset was keeping me from implementing the strategy. And then number two, there was actually some healing work that I needed to do. And so, eventually I ended up going back into therapy and working through some of those issues too. And that made a big difference, working on my mindset and doing some healing work.
Oh man, and there's such a great message in there that it's multiple layers of what's going to take you to really move down the path and to be successful or to see yourself moving towards your vision, because you can't kind of just do the learning or and not do the mindset or do some therapy, and then like you kind of have to do a combo of things that work for you. So thank you for sharing the stuff that worked in your journey, because I think that people need to hear the different types of resources, the different types of things to put in your toolbox that can really help you move forward. And I know in our past kind of conversations online and supporting each other's content, we've both talked about and thought about the frustration of that. What it was like to be in corporate, or what it was like to be working outside of your passion. And now that you've moved yourself into the place of being in alignment with your passion, how does that just feel for you as a person? Like, what is that like? In case anybody is not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could hear it if you're listening on the podcast, you might not hear it, but I just took a deep breath because it's like it's so refreshing. It's refreshing, I feel liberated and I feel fully self-expressed. And that is one of the ways that I felt uh very restrained in a corporate environment because there were a lot of, unspoken and spoken rules. And I'm a little bit of a rebel. Didn't always abide from the from them. But what I love about entrepreneurship is I can say whatever the hell I want online, or, I don't have to worry about whether someone's, if this is going to impact my work or how this shows up. Like I can just be me, fully expressed. And so for me, it's just all about that feeling of liberation and freedom. And it's like that's my top two value is freedom and self-expression. So I I won't say I will ever go back into a work environment because I think if there's an opportunity to make an impact, I may possibly, but let's just say I'm not really thinking about that at all right now, right? It have to be pretty darn good.
Yeah, I know you have the visceral reaction of one versus the other. It's like a different visceral reaction in some ways.
Yeah,
It's like a tightening around one and then an opening around another.
exactly.
It's funny. And I think you're right. It unless it was a really good opportunity, I can't even see myself entertaining it either because of the freedom. And I think that especially coming from the background I did in government, it was so one toxic, but very controlling. And you didn't have any freedom at all. It's designed that way, right? And so when you try to do things like express yourself or share knowledge openly, or give in a way that you want to give, it's not always welcome. And so I can appreciate what you're saying about the freedom to express your thoughts, your leadership, all of these things, even show up online the way you want to show up and not worry about having the censorship from outside. So, and I know that you do that with your content because I follow you, but if others don't, it's a great example of someone who's been able to step out, and that had to take a little bit of courage. I mean, I know you mentioned healing and other things, but what was that like for you to really say, no, my brand curses, I'm going to curse, or my brand says this, and so I'm going to do it that way? Like, was that like for you?
So when I first developed my business, now I go under Ruby Garcia coaching, but when I first developed it, it was under Women Warrior. And if you even follow my Instagram hashtag, it's still Ruby underscore woman Woman Warrior, and that was the business kind of branding that I had, was Woman Warrior, and it was all about that. It was all about like tapping into your courage and showing up as the most powerful, most authentic, bravest version of yourself. And I still use that language in a lot of the work that I do, because that is ultimately my commitment for women and for Latinas. And but when I first developed that brand, it was actually through that mastermind with a group of women when we were kind of brainstorming, and I hadn't yet even created my business yet, so I was in the process of doing that. And Woman Warrior was the brand. And what I realized, um, I didn't know this at the time, but now looking back, it was not even so much a brand. It was the person that I was being called into that wasn't yet. I didn't feel like Woman Warrior when that brand was created, even though it sounded great. I didn't feel like that person. And so I did have to grow into that. And I did have to exercise my courage muscle. And in the beginning, it was small, and it was small baby steps to have courage. And as I developed the courage, just like you're training in the gym, that muscle gets bigger. And so then I was able to take more risk and put myself out there more and say yes to opportunities that maybe I had said no to in the past. And so I was a work in progress. And of course, it never stops, right? We're always in evolution. So I can't even say I'm there now, right? Because as we up level, there's the saying, new level, new devil." Right. And so there's going to be another layer that I'm going to have to unpack in order to reach the next set of goals.
Oh gosh, yes, yes, absolutely. And that's part of why I called this podcast the social impact level up, because it's constantly like you're trying to make an impact. So you're always going to have to keep leveling up over and over and over again. And I think that's a really good example of that. And I want to switch like a slight gears a little bit,
Yeah.
but still staying on this frame where, in your content, you've spoken pretty openly about your lived experience, which I appreciate and I value, because I always think that people's lived experience is one of the best ways that we can learn from each other. And with what you last posted most recently that stuck with me was your experience as a Latina who is an American Latina or has a story of an American Latina. And it resonated so much with me that I was like, we're twinsies. It's so funny the way I just felt like held in the statements that you made. I was like, I could appreciate that. So I was wondering if you could tell people, because if they didn't read the post, they have no idea what I'm talking about, what this post was about for you and what you were expressing through sharing that story or that part of you and your identity and your journey.
Yeah, so identity, I always think, is the foundation to any type of work that I do with clients. But for me, my identity has played a huge portion, I think, in who I am, and my entire trajectory. So I grew up. I'm a daughter of Mexican immigrants, and very quickly my journey kind of takes a twist, because my dad passed away when I was 14 months old. My mom remarried to an American. So I like to tell people that I grew up Saturday mornings cleaning house, listening to Los Bukis, Los Temerarios, Ana Gabriel. And Sunday morning, my American dad would make brunch, and we were listening to Eric Clapton, Roy Orbison, Blondie, Fleetwood Mac. And so, I always felt like in between two worlds, because I had my Mexican family that lived in in a very Mexican little village in Chicago, and then, which is very predominantly Mexican. You could essentially call it Little Mexico, right? And then I had my American family, and I knew there was a lot of unspoken rules and ways of being when I was with my Hispanic side of the family, and there was a different way that we were when we were with my American side of the family. And so I always felt torn between these two cultures. And there's a picture, I've got to find it, but I have this picture from, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I'm sitting in the middle, and I have my Latina Mexican cousin on one side of me, and then I have my American cousin on the other side of me. And it's funny, because even looking back, I remember feeling confused. I don't wasn't sure what I was confused about, but I acted different with both of them. I was still authentic. I don't want to say, this wasn't about like faking anything, but it was confusing when I had to mix those two worlds, because they seemed to collide together. So I always kind of felt pulled in between. I wasn't, Mexican enough for my I was too Mexican for my American family. I was too American for my Mexican family, and I kind of always felt like I don't know where I belong, right? And even in my own family, I was the only one from my mom's first marriage. I was born with a limb difference, so I was a little different in that way. So I often felt like, where do I belong? And growing up, this was kind of a challenge for me, but as an adult, I have seen this as a gift, right? Because I think before I just wanted to fit into a certain box and I didn't know how to make that happen. But then as I got older, I realized there's no freaking box, right? Like I can be whoever I want to be and I can be all of it. And I have a wide variety of music selection now. So, it's the best of both worlds.
I love that there is no box, and yeah, it takes a long time to realize that there's no box because you're suddenly like, oh, well, what was I trying to do for so many years, trying to fit into this thing that never existed? Oh, okay, great. But I think I appreciate it because even without having that duality of parents and different sides of the family, I think even just with being Mexican by culture, but having to live in mainstream America, you can appreciate the idea of how much code switching has to happen throughout your lifetime of, presenting this way and then being this way. And it's not that you're not the same person, it's that you literally almost mold yourself to be successful where you're at. You're like, and sometimes this was in workplaces. I remember college being one of these places where I had different groups of friends and I would maybe feel a little different over here and a little different over here. And I always just felt so frenzied sometimes because I was too busy trying to do what I thought everybody else needed or wanted, or show up in like not a people pleasing way, but in a way that people would appreciate and value what I was bringing to their environment. And when I got older, I was like, oh, fuck that.
Yeah.
I don't know at what point that happens, but somewhere along the way, I was just like, y'all are gonna do what I want.
Yeah, at some point, all my American friends started kissing me on the cheek when they greeted me too, So I got
Yeah,
them in the habit of even
it's
customs like that.
I mean, I've even had people walk me into a building speaking Spanish to me and had to look at them and said, I don't speak Spanish. I'm happy for you to speak Spanish to me. I will respond to you in English. I understand everything you're saying, but this is where I'm at with Spanish. And just like, not unapologetically letting people know I am a Latina who does not speak Spanish and I'm tired of saying sorry.
Yeah. Well, and when we really look at the history, Spanish wasn't even our language. That was
Oh, true, fair.
because we were colonized, right? And that was the language that then was forced upon us. So when we really look at the history, it's not even really Spanish that would be, native to our origins.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think that
But
it's
I can
always
I
funny
can
to me.
relate though. I can relate. I
Yeah.
still get embarrassed if I have to. You we're good friends if I'm going to speak my Spanglish with you
Oh, I
because my
tell people
Spanish is still
there's
broken.
two places you're gonna catch me speaking Spanish: when I'm traveling because I need to, so I'm like on it, and people are much more forgiving because they know I'm not from there. But the second place is if I've been drinking for a
Oh
bit
yeah,
and you
totally.
need to like catch me in a conversation in Spanish. Actually, maybe the third place is like in Spanish Harlem. There, when I
Okay.
lived in New York, there was no getting away from it. Like I was going to speak Spanish at some point every single day, so I was decent at it at that point. But then it's like periods of my life I felt successful with Spanish, and periods of my life I felt very unsuccessful with Spanish. And I've just gotten over it. I'm like, I'm okay, guys. This is where I'm
I
at.
know. Exactly. Well, I managed to, um, as you know, I walked the Camino de Santiago last summer, and I said my Spanish got me through, across northern Spain. Hey, I'm good. It's good enough to get me through, and I didn't get lost, so I'm happy with it.
My Spanish was good enough to get me from the bus going in the wrong direction out of Barcelona to a taxi that got me to my camp. So
Okay, that's good. Perfect.
I was not heading to wherever that bus was going. Bus also, by the way, like Spanish buses are very confusing and they show up at the same stop, but there at certain points the line cuts off and another bus
Oh,
going to a completely different place comes to that same stop.
yeah.
In case you didn't know. There's some confusing stuff going on in Spanish buses. So make sure your Spanish is up to par if you're planning on taking the bus in Spain. So getting back on track, I think it's great though that you mentioned a couple times making an impact. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was when you started your own business and you said you were starting this brand and you kind of rebranded and did some things in there, but through all of it, you've maintained that making an impact is going to be part of your business model. So we talk about social entrepreneurship a lot in this podcast. And I just wanted to understand from you, what made you decide to build something based on impact, or something that's going to help others, or something that's not solely based on profit to support Ruby Garcia for the rest of her life?
Yeah. Well, I'm really, you know, so the first job I ever wanted to I wanted to be a nun, believe it or not. And the reason was because I really had a lot of admiration for Mother Teresa. And I wanted to go to Calcutta and like work in the orphanage and, just be of service. And even though I'm probably the farthest thing from a nun right now, I think that that is something that has always been in me, is to want to give, and I've always been drawn to social movements and causes, and I think sometimes that they can feel so big and out of reach. And the way that I've looked at my business and the work that I do is that by transforming ourselves, we can transform our families, our communities, the world even, right? I mean, and I know that sounds kind of, maybe that sounds too big for some people, but look at like Malala, for example, right? Like how she has changed so much around education and being an advocate and supporting gender equality. So I don't think that it is always on that level, but even if it's, making a bigger impact in your children's school system, or in the organization that you work for, or in the town that you live in, that those things, sometimes we think it's so far out of reach, but sometimes we feel the impact we make in the areas that are closest to us.
Yeah, and I don't think it's too out of reach, because there is always the option to change things like an advocacy level that are much bigger than you, that you maybe wouldn't even have ever dreamed of changing. So, I think people can appreciate that idea of, like, there's different levels of impact that you're able to make. And and there's even a whole model on it. It's called, if anybody wants to look this up, it's called the social ecological model. I could get my really nerdy hat on to say there's a whole body of work about this, about how individual and then sort of the communal levels of, like, family, friends, community, and then sort of the at large community, or the environment in which we operate, society, that kind of thing. These different levels, they require not only different solutions, but different kinds of expertise and different types of people to work at each of those levels. And so I love what you're saying. It's like, yeah, you can be inspired to work on any of them, and as big as change the world. But you still have to show up and take action and do the things that you need to do to get to that goal.
I love that. And yeah, I'm gonna have to hit you up later on for that, because I just think about some of the things that I've been really interested in is Latina wage gap, right? The pay gap is one of the things that have been a big focus. And even as I was writing my book, I also thought about food justice is another area that is really important to me. So, looking at it through those multiple lens can help you kind of think about, okay, what are the strategies that are needed behind each of those levels, right? Or the reading achievement gap for Latinos too, even things like
Yeah.
that. So there's an opportunity to solve huge problems, right? And maybe just starts with one person.
Absolutely. And the other thing about it that it maps back to is trauma. I know both you and I have talked about
Ooh,
this before, is the idea of how people experience trauma at those different levels, and how you can either prevent and mitigate, or you can treat and support, but still needing to have developed solutions for addressing trauma at each of those levels.
I'm like getting
So
all excited right now
I
because I'm like,
know
this
we're
is so nerdy, but I love it.
it's so super nerdy, guys. But if you're a social impact person, this is important,
Yeah.
right? Because we aren't all called to create a community program, or to do individual therapy, or to really work at the change policy Capitol Hill level. Like, that's not all of our purposes. But if each of us is working in our purpose and our zone of genius, and we all have those different skills, then collectively we are able to make a really big impact. And the thing that's really, I think, missing is the coordination of it.
Mhm.
or the layering of the solutions, or the introducing of these different types of people who are working at these different levels, to really help people understand, well, how do we maximize so that we can transform, so that we're not just all kind of working in our little worker bee, worker ant sort of situations,
Mhm.
but we are like maximizing all of our efforts. So,
Yeah, very good point. So many times we're working in silos, right?
mhm.
But if we really come together and collaborate, how much more power would it be behind it?
Yeah, and that's why we called this group a collective, because that's the goal of this whole collective, is like, let's start bringing voices together, let's start bringing people together, let's start amplifying, and then start sharing people's solutions. And so, kind of getting back to you and the solutions that you provide people, I know you have a ton of tools in your tool belt, but one that I think is super cool is the idea of hypnosis. And I know you've mentioned this a couple times before, and I want to hear more about it from your perspective. Like, how have you brought this into your work? What's your background in this? Like, what is this tool?
Yes, it is. It's not magic, and it's actually there's a lot of neuroscience behind it. So that's one of the reasons I love it is because our brain is so powerful, and it's like I think of it, hypnosis is the greatest mind hack ever, right? The greatest brain hack, and we're using our mind to leverage and bring speed and velocity to the things that we really want. And so hypnosis is it's again, it's not like the movies, it's nothing magical, it's nothing that I can make you do. You know, I had a boyfriend that said like, are you doing hypnosis on me? Like, you know, I was like, "No, I am
That's
not doing."
such a foul question. Like,
I
come on.
know, right? Like, really? Do I have to? It's nothing like that. Like, you know, I can't make anyone do anything. But, you know, really we it's very hypnosis is about being in a meditative state. You know, so if you think about being mindful, or even when you're watching a movie, the reason that, you know, have you ever watched a movie and then felt like you were like going through the emotions and maybe you start crying or you feel anger, you feel scared, right? That's because you're using your imagination to kind of put you in that situation. And that's kind of what hypnosis is. We're really tapping into your imagination, and you know, depending, there's a lot of different, even within hypnosis there's a lot of different modalities, right? So we could be working on releasing negative emotions, releasing fear, hurt, guilt, anger, any sadness, any of those feelings. Or we could be, you know, installing new habits, right? Or new ways of thinking. That's a huge one that I work on is, right, we might have some limited beliefs that keep us in the same cycles or same patterns or same you know, self-sabotaging behaviors. And so we look at, okay, what's the limiting belief here? And you know, think of a garden. Like when you pull a weed, it's going to grow back up, but if you pull the root out, then it's not going to grow back and you get rid of it. You're eliminating it. And so that's a lot of what hypnosis is we're pulling the root out. And then or another way that you can think about it is like we're installing new programming, right? Like if you know, I'm a little older, so if you go back to the DOS days, right? Right, so it's like you're getting rid of DOS and, you know, upgrading to I don't even know what we're on these days, but
Windows 5 million, I don't know.
yeah, exactly
I'm on
right.
a Mac, so I'm like, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, so but, you know,
Yeah.
it's upgrading to, you know, the latest version of Windows. So we're upgrading our belief system, and this can help us if we have, you know, for example, one area that I work a lot around is overcoming imposter syndrome. You know, learning to speak up and develop confidence. Uh, there was another one that I was just thinking. Oh, money mindset. You know, we might have limiting beliefs around money, and so we might use this to figure out what those are so that we can move past it. And so, hypnosis is what I love about it is that you don't have to get to the why, like, why do I believe this, or where did this story occur? You know, you don't have to get into all the background of it. It's just like, okay, there's this thing here, let's get to it, let's pull it out, let's reinstall something that's going to be of benefit and serve you, and then let's implement, right, and take action around it.
Oh, that's such a cool process to hear about, because it reminds me of just like cognitive behavioral therapy, and how, looking at our patterns and our narratives and interrupting those and replacing them with a more accurate or a more positive or whatever the need is sort of statement. I know I practice that a lot with thinking about money mindset, definitely thinking about like leadership principles and values and different things that I want to continue to espouse. Like I do a lot of this work too, but man, if there was a shortcut, if I
It
could just go
is.
to
I think it is like so I fell in love with it because, as I went through my training, I was actually doing the work too. So I was, thinking about some of my own goals, some of my own limiting beliefs, and I thought, when I realized how easy it was, I thought, "Oh my gosh, why doesn't everybody do this?" And that's why I talk about hypnosis and mindset quite often is because who doesn't want a shortcut? And not everything has to be hard and years of believe me, I am not knocking therapy. I'm a huge advocate for therapy and I think that it has its place. And and I think there are a lot of other modalities that we can tap into, including hypnosis, and if it can be a fast and easy process and you can break through stuff, within 6 hours, hey, why not?
Oh man, yeah, no, I think hypnosis gets a bad rap because whenever I think of it, I always think of Office Space. Do you remember that movie?
I do remember it, but I don't remember being hypnosis in
Oh
there.
yeah, you gotta watch it. It's great. He gets hypnotized, and that's where he decides to just like when he stops giving a fuck and just goes to work and goes ham. That's it's because he had gone through hypnosis and he never got unlocked. So he stayed
Oh,
in this
okay.
like
Yes. Okay.
hypnotic state that he just
Yes.
didn't care. And
Yeah.
he went through his whole journey in that hypnotic state. So it
Yeah.
reminds me of
So
that every
that's one
time.
of the myths. So is that like that you don't know what's going on. You're very, very aware of everything that's going on, right? You're just in a very calm and relaxed state. But I used it on myself this morning, as a matter of fact. I have a pendulum here, and I was having trouble. Uh, I felt stuck in one place in my business, and I was having trouble with it, with making a decision, and just very a lot of resistance. And so I just tapped into my unconscious and I don't know if anyone has ever used a pendulum, and for those that are listening, it's you can really use anything, but it's basically like a chain or um even a string, or even you can use your if you have the old air earbuds with the wires, you could even use that, and then the weight at the bottom. And what you do is you can tap into your unconscious mind and ask yes, no, or maybe questions, and it will give you the answers. And I mean, there's a few more steps to it. But I was really struggling, and I thought to myself, why don't I tap into this? Because we all have the answers within, right? Like I had the answer within, but I had to consciously, for whatever reason, there was some type of resistance and I was having difficulty unlocking it. So using my unconscious mind, I got to the answer that I need immediately. Immediately I had clarity and was like, okay, now I know what my next steps are, right? And that's the beautiful thing about hypnosis, because even as a hypnotherapist, I am really just guiding you to your own answers. Like I don't have the answers. There's nothing magical, like I said, that I'm doing. I am simply guiding you to find the answers from within, and um, and I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and I love the idea of you having your own solution. I talk about this a lot in my content too. You probably see me say this before. Like it's there somewhere inside of you, but you may have blinders on, or you may be working in a certain narrative that's been so prescribed to you that you can't see the answer. So having some of these other tools like meditation or journaling
Hmm.
or other practices that you use to unlock the answers from yourself, and I work with the pendulum too. It's somewhere back there in my woo woo stuff, but yeah, my pendulum's over here too. And I think that some people don't always believe in those things, but I call them kind of like your manifestation tool belt, where you have all these different tools at your disposal. Why not, in order to transform your life the way you want it, take some time to explore, be open to new modalities, be open to practitioners that you maybe never worked with before. And so I hear a lot of that in what you're saying too, is like kind of like give it a chance. And, it's not, a lot of the myths or things you might be scared of may not necessarily be true.
Yeah, there's a lot of myths around it, right? And even with the pendulum, there's nothing magic about the pendulum. It's that there are little your body actually will have like a visceral reaction, and there are little micro movements in your fingertips, that you are holding it straight, but it's so um tiny that you know it and again, some of you might have to kind of look up more on on how to use a pendulum, and it's very easy. You can go on probably YouTube and figure it out. But your body is giving you the answer, and it's coming through in those micro movements. And but I mean, what an easy way to get clarity.
So you mean you're telling me it's not the magic? Darn it.
I know. It's like
I always
magic.
believed in the magic of the pendulum. No, just
It's like
kidding.
magic. I mean, it feels
No,
like
I
magic just because it's so easy and fast and quick.
well, also because it's hard to outsmart yourself. So you could be literally looking at your fingers and going, I'm not moving them. I know I'm not moving them, yet it's moving in a direction. But like you said, it's almost like your autonomic nervous system response is kicking in, and like the little tiny things are happening without you doing anything.
Mhm. Yeah, and
So
I asked it. It only took me 3. No, I mean, actually, maybe a little more. Maybe it was like 5 questions, but they were 5 yes and no questions. It was really quick, and it didn't move, didn't move, didn't move, slight move, little move, and then all of a sudden it was like full force, and I was like, okay, there's my answer, And I was like, I've been sitting on this for too long. I don't even know how long, to be honest. That's how long, too long, and I hadn't even pulled out my own tool out of my own tool belt. And then today it occurred to me, like, ah, use this, and like I said, answer solved within 2 minutes.
yeah, so these shortcuts, folks, is what we're talking about. And the one thing I wanted to go back to, because this is a question I had from earlier, and when we were talking about Latinas, and you were talking about mindset and hypnosis can help you kind of get past some of those harmful narratives or limiting beliefs, but particularly for Latinas, and I know because this is one of your specialty areas, what are some of the common beliefs that you've seen across your clients or across Latinas who's come to you for this sort of support that they need help, unlocking? Because I think that just even having that discussion, and maybe some of our listeners will recognize some new things that they didn't realize they could get help with even.
Yeah. So I'm gonna share a story about and for those of you that haven't heard me talk about this, you can also find some more information on LinkedIn about it through my post. But I talk about last triplets, right? The triplets, which is Humble Hilda, Grateful Gloria, and Hard Work and Quana. And these are just basically some cultural scripts that I have discovered in the research of my book. I've interviewed over 40 women. I have led leadership programs for Latinas. I've coached one-on-one Latinas for the last 8 years. And these are some of the common narratives that come up. And so Humble Hilda is kind of a name I put it to just make it easy, digestible, relatable, right? But Humble Hilda has been taught to be humble, right? And so she's never self-promoting. She doesn't want to brag about herself. She doesn't want to own her accomplishments. She's, been taught, just to be humble and, you know, do your work, and that's about about it. And so because of that, her ambitions and mindset is kind of small, right? Kind of small, playing almost invisible, I want to say, and just kind of hiding out. And in order to, for example, whether you're an entrepreneur or working in a professional workspace, you have to have visibility if you want to grow and get to the next opportunity. And so that's one of the barriers that I see. And so moving past that humble narrative, and not that humility itself is a bad quality, and we have a tendency to label things good, bad, right, wrong, um, and it's not any of that. It just is, right? But it's about how we use those things. So humility is maybe not the best quality if you're trying to move up in your career, because you have to own your strengths, your expertise, your accomplishments, the value that you're contributing, the impact that you're making. And so we might look at trying to break through that narrative. Grateful Gloria is, she's just so grateful that you gave her an opportunity to work, that, she's just going to be loyal as loyal can be, probably stay in that job. Usually is, you know, even if she has aspirations, she might think to herself, like, well, I made it farther than my parents did. Isn't that enough? So there's that false belief, like, this is enough, and that it's not okay to want more. And so, we might look at that, right? Like the worthiness aspect of, like, you can have more. Like, it's okay to want more. That's not you're not asking for too much. And then the third one is hardworking quanta. And this is also one that's, I think, is very common because a lot of us are taught to work hard, keep your head down, work hard. Someone's going to recognize you for your hard work. And let's face it, usually no one's tapping you on the shoulder and saying, I notice your hard work. Now I'm going to give you all this extra money to compensate you, and let me give you some more opportunities. It usually doesn't work that way. And with the hardworking narrative, what I've noticed a lot is that women will associate their self-worth and tie it to their productivity. They feel like they have to prove themselves or justify their worth through their work. And then also, there's also this part of, like, everything's hard. Everything has to be a struggle. And, you know, again, here's an opportunity to tap into some of your natural gifts, talents, skills, abilities, to work with flow at ease. And wow, even work can be fun when you're doing something you love. What a concept. And so, those are a couple narratives that really stand out, where there's an opportunity to break through, whether it's at a conscious or through hypnosis, um, using your unconscious mind. And I will just say, only 10% of our conscious mind is used. Most decisions and the ways of showing up, and the ways our ways are being, is unconscious. So 90% of the way that we're showing up is through our unconscious mind. And that's why I love doing this work, because it's about, and I do, I'm starting to use the word hypno coaching, because I'm combining the hypnotherapy with the coaching, because it's where I think that we can have the best results is when we combine the unconscious mind with, conscious work, right? And bring those two together.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Is there a name when you've been all of them? Is there which
I call them las triplets, the triplets,
Yeah, yeah,
the triplets.
that's me. I think I've been all of those. And it goes back to what you said earlier before, when I wasn't being my fullest expression of myself.
Mhm.
But when I was able to move more into the direction of following my passion and being a more fuller expression of myself, those types of things fell away, but not without a great amount of struggle through the process, right? And that was the struggle though that I needed, not like the struggle of staying in that space, but
Mhm.
really going through the healing, like you said, and saying, okay, this is an issue. I need to move past it. I don't need to constantly work myself to death, or I don't need to constantly be worried about what I've accomplished and what that looks like to other people. There's just so many pieces of that that I appreciate. So yeah, and I do remember reading that before, and I was like, oh gosh, I I resonate with this so much.
I mean, I think we all do, because it's just so much of our that, we're talking about some of the main values of our culture. And I think that's why it's so relatable, right? Maybe some, maybe
Mhm.
one is manifested during a certain period more. And I even think with experience and age, that maybe, it's not so, it's not so in your face, I guess, or you learn to tame those. But, these are things that I think are deeply embedded in our culture, spoken and unspoken. And so it really does take some work to to break through these belief systems, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I love that it like you can still live in flow and be happy. You don't have to stay in these spaces and feel like you have to struggle in order to be successful. That's a
Mhm.
really great message. And the last couple things I wanted to ask you. So two more questions. I know we've been on for a bit. I don't want to keep you super long, although I could talk to you forever, girl.
I know.
Um, the question I wanted to ask about was more around generational trauma, because we know with people of color particularly, and also with Latinos, we have our own flavor of generational traumas that have come. How can we start to move past these barriers that, like you were saying, some of them are cultural narratives, but some of them are shared experiences. You mentioned immigration, like so many other issues. How can we, as a generation that's focused on healing, focused on our well-being, focused on, elevating and connecting with each other, how can we start moving past these generational traumas that exist?
Ooh, my first one is just we all need therapy. We all need therapy. If you don't have a therapist, find a therapist. And I say that half jokingly, but not really, because I really do think that, whether or not we've gone through traumatic experiences, probably if your parents are immigrants, they have, and that's been passed along, and trauma lives in DNA, and I think it goes back 12 generations even. Um, there's a great book that you can read, The Body Keeps Score, if you want to learn more about that. So I do think being engaged in therapy is really important to the healing. I think the other thing is really realizing that we are not trauma, like that is not our identity, because that is something that I see often as we take on, like, whether it's trauma or even failures, like people will take that on as part of their identity. And so I think it's separating the circumstances or incident from the person. That I may have gone through this, but I am not this thing. Then I think that that's really important. I think one of the other ways is to connect back into our own bodies. I feel like so many of us have, especially for Latinas, that we've been so disconnected from our own bodies and tapping into our own wisdom. And that's through, mindfulness, meditation, like, um, I, like I can't stand hustle. Like I'm a anti-hustler. When I hear that word, I just like, why? Like, I don't want to be in the hustle. Like, I just want to be in flow, or, so I think the other way is by, being okay to sit still, to be still. So many of us want to be distracted by music or TV or background noise or whatever, but sometimes it's just about being still and being alone and sitting with ourselves and whatever feelings or emotions that we're having come up. Journaling is a great way. Restorative circles. There are so many communities out there. That's one thing that I really encourage, is to find a community too where you can do some of this work. I come from a faith background, and about 2 years ago, I went through a a program that was all about uh, racial identity, healing from racial trauma, and we even went back and did some work and looking at our great grandparents and some of the narratives they told themselves, and looking at generational traumas and things like that. And it was a very safe community to do that in. So you can look for a community that it doesn't have to be spiritual. There's so many out there, restorative circles, um, where you can also start to do some of that work together. So I think there's individual work to do, and then there's collective work to do as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love the idea of restorative circles. Oh my gosh, yeah, that sounds so healing and
There's a
nice.
great one out in DC too. There's a lot of stuff out in DC.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I think everywhere. I'm part of a group of Reiki healers. We do Reiki shares and stuff like that.
Oh, I
And it's
love that.
just so yeah, I mean, I was part of a healing circle in Texas too that would bring like drummers and like the whole thing. I mean, and there's so many different ways to do the work, but you just have to find what calls to you and what
Exactly.
resonates with you. And
Exactly.
also, I mean, some of that is really hyper local. So according to what's available in your location, unless you're going to do an online thing, but I like to do a lot of in-person stuff too. So I appreciate that. So Ruby, I'm so excited that you came because I just love this conversation. But every conversation I have with you, I love. So I'm always continually just amazed by what a wonderful person you are and how you share your gifts with the world. And it's just really exciting to see. And so if people thought, and at all, this seems like somebody I'm interested in, I want to get to know more or might want to work with, can you do just a quick infomercial for yourself about who do you work with? Like who might want to work with you? How do you transform or help people? And how can they connect with you?
Yes, so I will kind of end it like I started. So, again, I'm Ruby Garcia, leadership and life coach working at the intersection of mindset. I teach Latinas how to move from self sabotaging thoughts and behaviors to self mastery by increasing their self confidence, their self love, their self worth, so they can show up powerful, brave, and fully expressed in the world. And I do most of my work through one on one and group coaching workshops and of course hypnotherapy, the secret weapon tool, right? And if you want to know more, you can connect me with me either on LinkedIn. That's probably where I hang out the most. You can also find me on Instagram or my website, www.rubygarcia.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you for our audience for listening to this episode and being here with Ruby and I, whenever you're listening to it or watching it. We have had a great time. We hope you've gotten some wonderful insights. And thank you for being part of the social impact level up community. We really appreciate having you. And thank you so much, Ruby, for being here. It's good to have
Thanks,
you.
Wendy. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too, girl. All right, everyone.
All right.
Take care. Hope you had a wonderful time watching and listening to this episode. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. It's been awesome to interview today's guest, and I hope that you leave inspired to take action. If you're looking for any of the information we spoke about, it's probably down in the show notes. Make sure that you're checking them out and you're clicking on any of the links that seem exciting to you. If you are looking for a coach or a consultant to help you with your social impact or your sustainability, reach out to me via my website, hop on my email list, or jump into one of my programs. All of the links are below. So excited to have you as part of the collective. Make sure that you come back and join us for another episode next week.